Welcome, folks. We're going to give it a minute or two for people to log on. But if you can hear me, then your audio is working. You're in good shape. Sit tight. Okay, it's 3:32, so we'll go ahead and get started as people continue to join. Welcome. My name is Michelle Bourne. I'm the Senior Manager of Training at the New York Immigration Coalition, and I'm delighted that you all are joining us this afternoon for this really important and timely training on the 2021 Child Tax Credit and how to serve our immigrant communities in New York State to be able to access it. I'm not going to say a whole lot more about the content of the training because our colleagues at the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, as well as I'm sorry, and now I forgot. Oh, Prepare and Prosper. I know it was PMP. Are going to have plenty to say about all of it. So I did just want to go over a few logistics, and then I'll introduce Jenny from the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities and give her the chance to introduce her colleagues. But so just some logistics for today. We do have a Q&A box at the bottom of our screen, and we will be tracking that and making sure that we're responding to those questions that we can. So please make ample use of that Q&A box because our trainers want to hear your questions and want to make sure that the information they provide is responsive to the questions you all have. You can also use the chat, particularly if you have any logistical issues or you need support. Please do let us know over the chat, and my colleague Ema, who you all have been in touch with in the course of registering for this, and I will be helping people throughout if you're having any technical issues in the chat. The session is being recorded, and so we will be sending out in a follow-up email a link to the recording in the case that you aren't able to stay on through the end. And in just a bit, I will send a link over the chat to the slides so that you have that in hand and can follow along, and we'll have that later as a reference. I think that's it with regard to logistics. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce Jenny Huang, who will then introduce her colleagues. So Jenny is the Outreach Campaign Strategies Manager at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which you're going to learn a little bit more about in a second from Jenny. Jenny's worked at the center since August of 2014 and has also worked as a communications fellow at the American Constitution Society, as well as at the Center for Law and Social Policy. And Jenny's been an amazing partner in planning this training and has really just been very intentional about listening to the questions that we're hearing from our partners. So I'm really just delighted to invite Jenny to introduce her colleagues and to provide this training, and so grateful that you all have just heard our need and are responding with this fantastic training today. So just a note too, we'll have 2 other colleagues from the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection join us about midway through, because they're going to present on some local resources. So if you see a couple other names pop up on your screen, we will certainly introduce them a bit later in the session. Okay, for now, over to you, Jenny.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We were so excited to get this request. Immigrants are very, very high on our list of who we need to be focusing on for child tax credit outreach. So it's just amazing to be able to reach people who are, I think, direct service providers and also just folks who work with immigrants. So it is very exciting for us. So thank you, Michelle, for inviting us. As Michelle mentioned, I'm Jenny Huang from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. We will also be hearing from my colleagues at the center, Roxy Keynes, who is the director of the outreach campaign, and Christine Tran, who is our amazing outreach intern. And then later on today, we'll also hear from Anel Mendoza, who we asked from Prepare and Prosper to join us. Anel is joining us from the Twin Cities. We're all over the country right now. We have Roxy in DC, I'm in Georgia, Michelle is in New York, Anel is in the cities, Christine's in California. So it's so fun to be able to do this. And Anel is the Spanish-speaking customer service manager at Prepare and Prosper, a nonprofit organization that prepares taxes for low to moderate income individuals and families. They offer financial and assist with ITIN application renewals, and worked at Prepare and Prosper for 11 years and is one of the 2 certifying acceptance agents at the organization. And I think that's it for the introductions. If we go to the next slide. So the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities is a nonprofit research and policy institute. We focus on federal and state policies designed to reduce poverty and inequality in equitable and effective ways. On the next slide, you'll see a description of the Get It Back campaign where Roxy, Christine, and I work. The Get It Back campaign is a national effort to connect eligible people to tax benefits. So in most years, we focus on the earned income tax credit, the child tax credit, and free tax preparation. The past couple of years with all of the pandemic madness around us, we've focused a lot of our attention on outreach around the stimulus checks, especially for those who we call non-filers, so people who don't normally file taxes. And of course, this year with the amazing CTC expansion, we're focusing a lot of our resources and work there. On the next slide, we will see an overview of what we'll be talking about today. So I'll kick us off with an introduction on the child tax credit. So what expansion looks like, how it's different from the previous child tax credit. Christine will be covering how to actually get the CTC payment. So if you have a client coming in who isn't sure of next steps, we will cover that today. Roxy will be covering troubleshooting and myth busting. So of course, we know that tax filing can be scary. And interacting with the IRS can be scary, especially for immigrants and their families. So we'll cover that. And Anel later will, as a certified acceptance agent, we'll be covering applying for an ITIN. And then at the end, we will have time for resources when we will be joined by the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. And then we'll have about maybe 20 minutes at the end for a Q&A. So please ask those questions in the Q&A box and in the chat so that we're prepared to answer them later on. All right, so to kick us off on the next slide, you will see a quick check-in question. So as I'm talking about the CTC, I would love to hear more about you. So please share your name and organization in the chat. If there's anything else you are interested in sharing with us, we'd love to know more about you. So while I'm chatting CTC, I want to hear from you as well. Amazing. On the next slide, and one more down. So we have here some CTC basics. So Oh, and I love seeing everyone answering the chat. So thank you so much. So on this slide, you will see some of the basic points that we really want folks to know about with the new child credit. Well, not new, but the expanded child tax credit. So under the American Rescue Plan, almost every family can receive money from the child tax credit, and this is huge because this was not the case before. This includes that have not filed a tax return and normally would not file a tax return. This includes families without recent income, which is different from before. And it also includes families where the children have a Social Security number, even if the tax filer does not have a Social Security number. And amazingly, this credit is now worth $3,600 for families with children under 6 years of age and $3,000 for each child between 6 and 17 years old. So that, as we know, is a huge amount of money for a lot of the families that we work with. And so that's why it's just so important to get this information out there. And unlike other tax credits and the CTC in the past, half of the amount of the credit will come as monthly payments for these families between July 15th and December 2021. So the payments already started last month. And then the families will get the other half of this money in 2022 when they file their taxes for 2021. And then finally, another point we really love to emphasize is that this credit is not a loan. It does not change your access to public benefits either, but you do not worry about paying this money back. It's not a loan. If you can go to the next slide. I wanted to first cover who is eligible for the full credit from the parents' point of view. So for parents and guardians of children, there are three main eligibility requirements. So the first is that the parent has either a Social Security number or an ITIN, so any tax filing number. The second point is that there is no minimum income, so you can make $0 and get the credit, but this credit does start to phase out. It reduces in amount starting at $75,000 if you're filing single and $150,000 if you're married filing jointly. And then finally, the third eligibility requirement is that you have a qualifying child, which I will cover on the next slide. So there are 6 defining points to a qualifying child. So first, the child must be related to you in some way. So it must be your child, grandchild, stepchild, adopted child, or younger siblings, or younger step sibling, or younger half sibling, or their dependent, or a foster child placed with you by a government agency. The second point is that the child must be 17 or under on December 31st, 2021. The third point is that the child must live with you in the US for more than half of the year. And the time living together does not have to be consecutive. So it can be like 1 month here, 1 month there. And then the child claimed for the CTC must have a valid Social Security number. So the parent does not have to have a Social Security number, but the child does to claim that child. The child cannot provide more than half of their own support. And the child must be considered a dependent for tax filing purposes. Can you click again, please, Ema? So just wanted to point out that there is an exception for non-custodial parents who are permitted by the custodial parent to claim the child as a dependent. There's a waiver form involved. There is an exception to the residency rule, but most children will have to have lived with the parent for more than half the year. So on the next slide, we'll see a couple fun scenarios just to see, just to test you out on what you've learned. So if you click once, you'll see the first scenario. So we have a family here, Kim and Ron. Kim and Ron do not have Social Security numbers, but their children, Rufus and Bonnie, do. So in the chat, if you could answer, can this family get the child tax credit? Okay, I'm just going to give a few more seconds to respond. A lot of yeses in the chat. If you'll click once more, we'll see the answer. Yes. Okay, so amazing. So to claim the child tax credit, only children need to have a social security number. Parents can have either a social security number or an ITIN. Amazing. Everyone answered yes. You all know your stuff. If you'll click once more, we'll see one more scenario. So Rufus is 3 years old and Bonnie is 12 years old. How much can this family get for the child tax credit? So again, answers in the chat, and you don't have to add it. If you just want to give the two amounts, that's also fine. Amazing, there's some math happening. Okay, so this one is a little bit trickier. So if you recall, the amount that you get for the credit is, it's different for children depending on how old they are. So if you'll click once more, you'll see that, so they will get a total of 6,600, and that's because Rufus is 3, so under 6, and so they'll get 3,600 for Rufus, and then 3,000 for Bonnie because Bonnie is over 6. So the total amount they'll receive is 6,600, and yes, it does depend on age, which is why we included that. And so they will receive half of this amount in monthly payments and then get the rest of the money when they file a tax return in 2022. Yes, many people got it right. And this one was a little bit trickier, but wanted to quiz you all. All right, so in the next slide, we'll see. So I know this slide is a little bit overwhelming. We wanted to just include it, but you do not have to read through this right now. We did a little bit of message testing and working on messages around the child tax credit, and we specifically created a document for immigrants and their families. So these are some of the key messages we thought were important to include for immigrants and their families. So the first is just to mention that, like, when you're talking about it, you can just say something like, if your child has a social security number, your family likely qualifies for the expanded child tax credit, really emphasizing that it doesn't matter what your tax filing ID is, it's really about your children's. And that, like, non-citizen parents can still apply for the child tax credit if their children have these social security numbers. We thought, of course, it's important to include how much money the families can get. That can really motivate people to take action. As I mentioned before, a lot of people have heard that this money, so it's important to just reiterate that it is not a loan. And then we have a little bit of language around public charge and some of the fears that people might experience, but just wanted to have a messaging point here about that receiving this credit does not impact immigration status or ability to apply for citizenship. And the IRS share citizenship information with immigration or any other federal agency. And so just like a few of these points here, we will, I think Michelle already shared out the slides for today. So you will have access to all of these messages. So if you can click on to the next slide, Ima. So we also at the center know how important data is, and we put together a paper on the people who are at risk of missing out on the child tax credit. So through the research at the center, the center did find that roughly 4 million or more children are in families that will not get advance payments automatically. So they're the people who are at risk of not getting the child tax credit. Of these families, about 2.6 million, or is it 2.3? In that range, children do have health insurance, don't appear on a tax return. So these are children of non-filers. And then 1.6 million children will be born into Medicaid coverage. So this is a group that really will need outreach. And so, of course, we also have in the slide this broken down in New York. So 199,996 insured children are not shown on tax returns, and 110,653 potential newborns with Medicaid coverage may also, we're also concerned about them missing out. So this is an unclaimed CTC amount of $100 million in New York alone, right? These are some big numbers. And if you want, you can look at the report. We will, the link is in here and you can access us in the slides to get state by state numbers if you're not joining from New York. In the next slide, of course, the population that you're working with it will differ depending on your community, but we wanted to just share some of the folks that we're most concerned about reaching. So in terms of outreach, we're really worried about those with very low incomes, including those who are self-employed. We're worried about those with lower education levels and with disabilities. Because it's hard to file a tax return or use the non-filer form without internet access, that's a population we're worried about. And we're worried about those who are housing insecure. In terms of racial demographics, we are concerned about Black or American Indian or Alaska Native and other groups of color. And of course, because of the fears around filing taxes, we do worry about reaching those who lack Social Security numbers, but whose children have Social Security numbers and who don't speak English as their first language. So it's just a few things to consider as you're thinking about how to do your outreach. If you can go to the next slide. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Christine Tran, who will cover getting advanced CTC payments.
All right, hi all. So yes, I'll be going over getting the advanced CTC payments. So if you could go to the next slide. So one important thing to know, go ahead and just click through. Yes. There you go. So one important thing to keep in mind is that most families will already automatically receive advanced CTC payments. There is no further action required from families who already filed a 2019 or 2020 tax return if they receive their stimulus checks or if they use the 2020 IRS non-filer tool to sign up for stimulus checks. For families who haven't taken any of these actions, which mean they haven't filed a tax return in 2019 or 2020, and they haven't received any of their stimulus checks, then the IRS will not have information about them and can't send them the payments automatically. They will have to go ahead and take action. And there's two ways to do this. First, they can use the IRS non-filer portal to claim the CTC and any missing stimulus payments. They can only use the non-filer portal if they're not required to file taxes. So for a 2020 tax return, as a single filer, you're required to file taxes if you make more than $12,400. The second option, if they are required to file taxes or if they want to claim other tax credit benefits like the Earned Income Tax Credit, otherwise known as the EITC, they should go ahead and file a full 2020 tax return. You also want to note that you don't need a filing requirement to file a full tax return to access other benefits like the EITC. So we do generally advise if you have any income or children to consider filing a full tax return instead to access other tax benefits and get more money. However, to access the EITC, you do need a Social Security number. So advise on a case-by-case basis what your client should do. Let's go to the next slide. So like I talked about, next slide one more time, please. Thank you. So the non-filer portal. So this is option one of what they can do to submit their information to the IRS in order to get their child tax credit payments. Think of the non-filer portal as a way to submit a more simplified tax return, and it allows you to sign up for advanced CTC payments. You can also claim your first and second stimulus checks as a recovery rebate credit. So if your client didn't get any of the stimulus check or they didn't get the full amount that they are eligible for, they go ahead and fill out on this form, and it'll also sign them up for the third stimulus check that they'll get later in the year. Next slide. Next slide one more time, thank you. So this slide is different from the IRS non-filer portal. The IRS also released this as around the same time as the non-filer portal, and this portal, known as the Child Tax Credit Update Portal, or CTC Up for short, is for people who have already filed taxes or submitted their information to the non-filer form. So the Child tax credit update portal is basically a portal that allows you to manage your payments. For example, you can check your eligibility. So if you're going to be getting CTC advance payments, see your payment schedule to see when your payment has been sent and if it's been sent already. And you can add any new kids, such as kids born in 2021. So the IRS can have that information and adjust the monthly payments accordingly. The update portal will also allow you to change or add bank account information. So if you don't have the most recent banking information on file with the IRS, you want to make sure and go ahead and update that. It'll also show you if you don't have bank account information and you're currently receiving your advance payments by mail, you can go ahead and update and add that bank account information so you can get it by direct deposit. Later on in the year, you'll also be able to change your income, your marital status, and like I said, number of children. The CTC Up portal will also let you opt out of advance payments if maybe your client prefers to receive a larger refund all at once when they file taxes next year. So go ahead and let's go to the next slide. So this slide just goes over ways you can connect families to the CTC. People who haven't received payments automatically might need more hands-on support to access these credits. So here are four ideas that you can do to help. So first is to help people use the IRS non-filer portal. I want to emphasize here that you don't need to be a tax preparer to use the portal. You can go ahead and watch our training video that's linked in this presentation, or use our step-by-step guide with screenshots. Either of these options go through step-by-step ways, the correct way to fill out the IRS non-filer portal that you can use to help your clients. The second thing you can do is help clients apply for an ITIN. Like Jenny mentioned, to get CTC payments, parents and caregivers can have either SSN or an ITIN. Only children need to have Social Security numbers. So if your client doesn't have a Social Security number, you can help them apply for an ITIN if they don't already have one. A note here, to use the IRS non-filer portal to claim the child tax credit, you need to already have an ITIN that you can enter in. Whereas if you claim the child tax credit by filing a full tax return, you can submit an ITIN application alongside your tax return. So you should evaluate with your client which would be quicker for them to get their child tax credit payments. A third way you can help is provide computers for people. Like also Jenny has said, the IRS non-filer portal and the child tax credit update portal is only available online, and some people might lack the technology. So setting up hotspots or Wi-Fi or computer stations would be a great way to help people sign up for payments. Then, last but not least, you can answer basic questions about the child tax credit. So even for people who are set to receive their child tax credit payments, they might still have a lot of questions about the CTC and advance payments. Being able to talk to your clients about the CTC and address some of their concerns and questions will be really helpful in helping your clients feel reassured. For example, if they have questions about immigration status or public benefits, people would need to know that getting the CTC doesn't impact their immigration status or ability to apply for citizenship and doesn't impact any of their other public benefits. And we'll talk more about that later once Roxy presents. You can also check out our CTC FAQs that will be linked to the resource slide of this presentation that goes over just frequently asked questions that people might have about the child tax credit and help prepare yourself to answer questions that your clients might have. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Roxy, who would go over just some of the challenges and barriers that people, and especially immigrant communities, might face when thinking about the CTC and how to access payments. Roxy is the Get It Back campaign director.
Thank you so much, Christine. So we are going to take a look at 4 categories of areas where you may need to provide some troubleshooting. So the first category on the next slide we can see is public charge. And people may be hesitant to claim the child tax credit if they are worried about being considered a public charge. So there's a great outreach opportunity here. One is that you can let people know that as of March 9th, 2021, the public charge rules that were in place are no longer in effect and they don't apply anymore. If we click, we can look at other opportunities to address this challenge. So you can inform people that receiving the CTC or other tax credits does not impact their immigration status or ability to apply for citizenship. Tax credits have never been considered in the public charge assessment, so you can reassure people about that. And there are some links that you'll get access to that provide more information on what is considered in public charge, and just provide some other details that can address any other questions people have related to getting other benefits and the concern of public charge. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at the challenge of being undocumented. And people who are undocumented may think that they're ineligible to get the child tax credit. So here we can look at the opportunities, and we can see that one opportunity, when we click, we'll see the opportunities. One opportunity is to inform people that only their children have to have a Social Security number. So you've heard this mentioned earlier in the presentation, and I just want to re-emphasize that this is a really important part of outreach and messaging and helping to address people's concerns and fears. A parent or other caregiver tax filer can have a Social Security number or an ITIN. And this also, same rules apply to DACA recipients. So as long as the child has a Social Security number, that person can be eligible to get the child tax credit. Additionally, children who are DACA recipients do qualify for the child tax credit because they have Social Security numbers. So next, we'll take a look at the challenge related to ITINs. On the next slide, we can see that there is another challenge related to being undocumented. Excuse me, before we go to ITINs, we also want to note that people may be hesitant to claim the child tax credit because they're worried about immigration enforcement. And this is a really important opportunity, as Christine mentioned, to provide some education and reassurance. So you can inform people that the IRS has confidentiality laws that prohibit the IRS from sharing taxpayer information with other government agencies. And this includes the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So no information is shared, except there is one exception. Information may be shared about a tax filer in cases of criminal fraud or in cases where they are investigating terrorism. So those are the only reasons why the IRS may share information. Otherwise, they are not allowed to do so. So the next slide, we'll turn to ITINs. So some people don't have ITINs, and this is necessary to be able to get the child tax credit. You have to file a tax return or use the non-filer portal, which is filing a tax return, and that ITIN or Social Security number is needed. So what are the opportunities? When we click, we can see that there are opportunities to assist people in getting ITINs, and we'll hear more about this shortly. We can assist people with filing for an ITIN and mailing their documents. And this really is only recommended if your organization already is doing this and has expertise in this. Again, we'll hear about this more shortly. You can also refer people to places for help with ITIN documents. So this includes the IRS Taxpayer Assistance Center and also a certified acceptance agent. These are locations that can help review documents, make sure that things are acceptable so that someone can have their return processed. Additionally, when someone applies for an ITIN, they need to complete a specific form and include a completed tax return with it. So you can refer people to VITA sites to help them prepare their tax returns. And VITA stands for Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. One other thing I want to share related to tax filing is that some people may be concerned. Actually, let's go to the next slide. So filing taxes is another area of challenge that you may see. Some people who are not required to file taxes don't want to file a tax return, or may be hesitant to use the non-filer portal. So here there's an opportunity to provide some education and information as well. So one, you can encourage people that filing a tax return or using the non-filer portal will allow them to get money from the child tax credit and from the stimulus payments if they're eligible. Filing taxes also could be helpful for their future immigration case and serve as proof of good moral character. It also helps in documenting their income, residence in the US, and whether they're married. And these are things that are looked at when someone is applying for citizenship. Additionally, you can find out if there are other fears related to tax filing to address. And so there may be a fear, for example, people may be hesitant or concerned about reporting unauthorized work on a tax return. And so there's a few things to keep in mind that you can share with clients, some of what we've already talked about. One is that the IRS wants to have people in the tax filing system. And ITINs allow people to report their earnings and pay their taxes, even if they cannot get a Social Security number. And this is why the IRS created an ITIN. The IRS, again, is prohibited from sharing taxpayer information with other government agencies, except in the cases of criminal fraud or terrorism. And the IRS has facilitated electronic filing of ITIN returns, even when the W-2 may show a Social Security number. So the IRS automatically sends information to the Social Security Administration from W-2s. And if the Social Security Administration finds that the Social Security number does not match the employer's information that the employer has reported, the earnings are noted as a mismatch file. And the Social Security Administration may send a report to the employer, but it's not a red flag for the IRS. The IRS is still going to process the return. When the Social Security Administration sends that report to the employer, employers may or may not do anything. They may or may not act. Some employers are aware that this is happening, and so they don't really have it doesn't impact them. They aren't as concerned. But other employers, maybe they will actually say something. So this is a concern that it doesn't, when you look at it from the IRS perspective, the IRS wants to get people in the system, and they are processing returns even when there is that mismatch. So the next slide, one more challenge is related to the non-filer portal, which we did hear about a little bit earlier. And some people without a permanent address are worried that they can't actually use the IRS non-filer portal since this is a required field. So there's an opportunity here to connect people who are unhoused or don't have a permanent mailing address to organizations, service providers, local shelters that are willing to let them use their address to receive the payments. These organizations, it's helpful if they become an IRS trusted partner, and this will allow the IRS to make a note that this is an organization that may be receiving multiple refunds, and so they will know not to apply a fraud filter to that organization, which could delay the delivery of other payments. So you can become, an organization can become an IRS trusted partner by reaching out to their IRS territory manager. In addition, you can inform people that they could also use the address of a trusted friend or relative. And the IRS also delivers checks to PO boxes as well. Alternatively, people can get their payments through direct deposit, and this is recommended as a faster and quicker method. So if someone has direct deposit information, then the address isn't as much of a concern. They will still have to include an address in the portal, but at least they know that they will receive their payments electronically. Another related challenge is that of direct deposit. So some people think that they can't get the CTC payments if they don't have a bank account. This is a field on the non-filer portal, but it is not required. So the opportunity here is to connect people to different options for direct deposit. You can inform people that they can get CTC payments by mail, and if they don't have a permanent mailing address, they can go over what we just talked about, use those options. You can also get direct deposit through other methods, such as a prepaid reloadable debit card or using a payment application, such as Cash App, Venmo, or PayPal. And finally, there's an opportunity to connect people to bank accounts. So you can go to this website developed by Bank On, the Bank On Coalition, that has identified bank accounts that specifically have requirements that are friendly for people with lower incomes. So now I will turn it over to Anel, who will share more about applying for an ITIN.
Thank you, Roxy. Okay, so I will go through the process of applying for an ITIN. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this slide talks about who needs an ITIN. So individuals who are required to file a tax return, and this also applies to individuals that are not required to file a tax return, but want to file a tax return to receive certain tax credits, but they are not eligible for a Social Security number. It allows them to participate in the tax system by applying for an ITIN. ITINs are for federal tax filing purposes only. So ITINs are issued regardless of immigration status, because both citizens and non-citizens may have a tax filing requirement. An ITIN does not allow you to receive Social Security benefits. And although it does allow individuals to receive the child tax credit for their dependents that have Social Security numbers, unfortunately, it does not make you eligible for the earned income tax credit. An ITIN does not change your immigration status, and it does not give you the right to work in the United States. People who apply for ITIN include undocumented immigrants required to file a tax return or wanting to file a tax return to receive certain credits, U.S. residents, and this for immigration purposes doesn't mean that you are like a permanent resident, but based on the number of days that you are present in the United States, you are considered a resident for tax filing purposes. Individuals that use ITINs are also dependents or spouse of a U.S. citizen or resident, and a dependent or spouse of a non-resident immigrant holding a visa. If we click to the next slide, this will show us the forms that are needed to apply for an ITIN. So this is the W-7 form, application for an IRS individual taxpayer identification number. And then on the right side, we have the 1040 form, which is the form that federal tax return is filed on. When you initially apply for an ITIN, a federal tax return must be attached to the ITIN application along with certain documents. If we can click on the next slide. So this shows the documents that must be submitted to apply for an ITIN or renew an ITIN. So we have to prove identity of the person that is applying or renewing an ITIN, and we also have to prove their foreign nationality. And so these are the documents listed on here. I won't go through all of them, but basically, if we use a passport to apply or renew an ITIN, that is a standalone document. So we wouldn't need anything else. If it does have a date of entry to the United States, because again, we have to prove that the individuals live here in the US in order to be dependents. If it's the primary taxpayer, then it does not have to have a date of entry. Otherwise, we would need two documents, one from each of the next columns, one that would prove identity and the other one that would prove their foreign status. And these documents do have to be originals presented to either the certifying acceptance agent or the acceptance agent. And the difference between that is that certifying acceptance agents can validate the documents that are presented to them. Therefore, they make copies and mail copies to the IRS along with the certificate of accuracy saying that we did view the original documents, and therefore the individuals that are applying do not have to send their original documents for this process. If we can go to the next slide. So dependents applying for an ITIN. So special considerations apply for dependents who are applying for or renewing an ITIN. So you can't just apply for an ITIN for like a brother or a sister or a nephew that do not live in the United States. You have to prove on your tax return that this individual qualifies the primary taxpayer for a tax benefit. So either they can qualify you to be head of household, they can qualify you for a credit for other dependents or an education credit. And again, so most dependents must have a passport with a stamped date of entry to be able to apply. Otherwise, we can use the passport, but since we have to prove that they live here, then alternate documentation is needed for that. And that for individuals that are school age, you can use a letter from the school stating that they do attend school there, or medical records to prove that they live here in the United States. And parents who are dependents are an exception to being able to having to prove that they live here, because for example, a single taxpayer that files taxes but claims their dependent mother or father that lives out of the country, we don't need proof that they live here. On the W-7, we do just write that they have never entered the United States, and then supply a copy of the passport. So next we will view the slide that has steps on how to apply for an ITIN. So we can click to the next slide. So you can provide information to customers you are working with that they can receive assistance in filing for an ITIN or renewing an ITIN at IRS taxpayer assistance centers. And so certain centers can help with this application, and then that will also allow customers not to have to submit original documents to the IRS because they are certified there at some of the technical assistance centers, the taxpayer assistance centers, I'm sorry. You can also refer them to certifying acceptance agents, and so that is the same. They do not have to send in original documents, or they can mail in their W-7, which is ITIN application, along with the documents to prove identity and foreign status and tax return. And those can be also mailed into the IRS. But of course, if they're mailing in that information, then they would have to mail in original documents. On the IRS website, there is information about, there is a list of certifying acceptance agents throughout the United States and even outside of the country. And then there is also a list of certifying acceptance agents that also help through VITA. So they can be assisted in filing a tax return and applying for an ITIN at certain locations that provide those services. So we can go to the next slide. So yeah, this is the information that, says about what you need to mail in and where they can receive those services. And then it also says that some acceptance agents also offer free tax preparation. So those are the VITA sites that do have some certifying acceptance agents. If we can go to the next slide. So the last step after you apply for an ITIN is the waiting game. It does take the IRS, usually it is 8 to 10 weeks, but right now with the pandemic and everything that is happening, it is taking about 16 weeks to process an ITIN application. So once the IRS approves and sends out the ITIN number to the applicant, their tax return is processed after that. Any individual that sends in original documents, those will be returned within 65 days. So, it is a better option if a customer is able to go to a certified acceptance agents, because some individuals that are immigrants have their passport, and that is like the only identification they have. And so to be without it for more than a month, could, create some, hassles or issues for them. So people will still receive their child tax credit amount in 2021 if their ITIN application and tax return was processed before 2021. They will just get larger payments when they file their tax return if they don't receive the child tax credit before then. Can we go to the next slide? Oh, I thought there was a slide before that. I'm sorry. So you must submit your Form W-7 with the completed tax return in order for the process to be complete. And so on the next slide, I guess those were links to resources wherein you can get information about the child tax credit. So with that, I will pass it on to Jenny.
Yes, thank you so much, Anel. If you can go to the previous slide. I just wanted to quickly talk about a few of the resources that we have available. Our website is at taxoutreach.org. And so we have a CTC outreach resources hub at taxoutreach.org/coronavirus. And if you go there, you will be linked to all of these other pages. We have so I know we can't cover all of the tricky questions that we get about the CTC, but the first resource there, What's New About the Child Tax Credit in 2021, does cover a lot of those tricky scenarios. And then I also wanted to point out there, I know we talked about the outreach research paper that's linked there. The IRS territory managers, those are the folks that you would need to reach out to if you are wanting to provide your address for folks who don't have a permanent address. We also have a bunch of navigator resources. So navigators are folks that we, the term that we have right now for folks who can answer questions about the CTC or help fill out the forms and all of that good stuff. We did a training on going through the forms step by step a couple weeks ago, and those are linked there, as well as all of those step-by-step guides. And then finally, one of the other resources that we have that I wanted to point out is our outreach toolkit, where we have messaging and earned media materials, a social media toolkit, call and text scripts, and newsletter copy, and flyer and postcard. So unfortunately, most of those materials are only available in English, but the flyer and postcard, we will be translating those in the next couple weeks, and those will be available soon. Just looking at this list to make sure nothing missing. If you go to the next slide, so the multilingual CTC resources page, we've just compiled like all of the resources we can find available in different languages for now. So if you have any resources that we've missed, please send them over. One of the resources is a toolkit created for outreach to immigrant families. This covers both the child tax credit and the stimulus checks. And it has a media guide, talking points for media, press release template, and a sample media pitch. And the next slide, you'll see we also have a flyer, social media graphics and posts, sample text message, sample email, sample radio, PSA script, and all of these materials in this toolkit are available in 6 languages, including English, French, Arabic, Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese. If you go to the next slide, you'll see, so that last slide was our poster / flyer from our last toolkit. This is the flyer that we created specifically for the child tax credit, and this is the material that will be translated into other languages in the next couple weeks. Next slide, please. So we want to put together just a few national resources. So luckily we have folks who can cover the New York resources, but in case there aren't as many in your area or you're joining from somewhere else in the country, we have a few places that you can still send folks to. So the first is ITIN.org. This is a great website that explains the credit, eligibility, how to get the credit, and it also does link directly to the IRS non-filer form, as well as free tax filing services. So that's a great site to send people to, very actionable. I think you all know about the 2-on-1, so I won't cover that, and I think the folks from the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection will cover the New York's hotline specifically. There's also the childtaxcredit.com website. This website has a great FAQ section and a great CTC eligibility calculator that helps people understand how much they can get the credit. So again, helps drive people to action. And then finally, letsgetset.co is a website that offers a like a text update service. So you can go to that link and sign up, and then they can stay informed about key updates of various portals, like when you can finally add a child who was born in 2021. And I think you can turn to the next slide. So this is just the contact information for the Get It Back campaign. I think we can stop the screen share, and I will turn it over to Michelle Vlies and Charlie Driver of the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, who will talk more about the local resources available to you all in New York State, or New York City rather.
Hi, thank you. It will actually just be me from DCWP's end, but I'm happy to talk through everything. So the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection is the agency that is in charge of protecting and enhancing the daily economic lives of New Yorkers. So we do a few different things in that capacity, including licensing businesses, enforcing workplace protection laws, but we also have one of the first of its kind in the nation, a Municipal Office of Financial Empowerment. And that office, the OFE, is the one-stop shop basically for financial empowerment resources, financial information provided for free to anyone who lives within New York City. And so we've activated the resources that are part of that office for to make sure that the people can access and are aware of the advanced child tax credit. So in terms of the resources that we have, specifically relating to the advanced child tax credit, if people are non-filers of taxes and need to file their taxes or file, a non-filer form to be able to access the credit, they can use our free tax prep resource. That's basically, we would have tax preparers who are trained, volunteers around the city, meet up with you either virtually, in person, or work over the phone and over the computer to help you complete your taxes and walk you through all the steps inherent in that. We also have a program of free financial counseling, and the financial counselors as part of that program can help out, basically prepare you to file your taxes. And a really important part of that is they can actually help you open a bank account. So instead of having to, receive the tax credit as a check and go to somewhere to cash that check, you can set up direct deposit. You can create a bank account, and we can help you do that. I'm going to put links in the chat for everything I'm talking about now, so don't worry about like writing down names or anything. But there's a program out of that free financial counseling that's called New York City Safe Start. And the New York City Safe Start account is a type of bank account that you can set up at certain eligible partners, where all New Yorkers can set up an account that has no overdraft fees, no monthly fees, a low minimum balance requirement, which basically comes out to $25 or less, and access to an ATM card. So that's a great way for people who are unbanked to start that bank account, to start that financial security that comes with a bank account. And so I will link to that in the chat as well. So those are the main things. Also, if we're talking on a community-based organization level, we have a bunch of flyers that we've prepared, translated into the top 10 or 11 languages in New York City that we can share. We have a social media toolkit. Myself and my colleagues are also doing presentations and tabling. So if you have an event coming up, or if you have a class where there's a lot of potential parents, we're happy to come and present or be a presence in that way. So that's the main resource from the New York City end. The way you can sort of figure that out is by going to DCWP, just Google NYC DCWP online, or go to nyc.gov/DCA, or also by calling 311, which is the municipal hotline, and just ask for free tax prep or free financial counseling. 311 is accessible to people in multiple languages. We have a ton of languages on just built in, and we also have translation services that are available. The same goes then for our financial counseling and for our free tax prep that's available to people in multiple languages. So that is all from the city's end. I'll throw it back over to Michelle or someone else from the call.
Great, thank you, Charlie. And I'm just putting a note in the chat too that we will send, Charlie's going to send out some links over the chat, and we'll consolidate all those and send them out in the follow-up email to folks. So if you're not, able to copy all those over from the chat, don't fear. We'll put it in an organized document and send it out to everybody after the training, along with a link to the recording. Okay, Jenny, I don't want to cut you short. I want to hand it back over to you to see if you had any sort of concluding remarks before we move into Q&A.
No brilliant concluding remarks from us. Just so excited that folks are talking about the CTC with their clients, and yeah. Thanks so much for joining and hearing from us. And then, yeah, happy to take questions.
Excellent. I have a couple questions already queued up, and folks, feel free to continue to put your questions. If you could put them in the Q&A box, it's a lot easier for us to keep track of. And that way I can also sort of field those out to our various presenters. So let me start, and I'm not sure if you'll take this, Jenny, or if you want to lob this to one of your colleagues, but both Ingrid and Andrea, I'm not sure how you pronounce your name, have asked, what should they do if they're working with a family who clearly has eligible children, they filed their 2020 taxes and they haven't received the CTC?
Great question. I think the first thing is to ask when they filed their taxes, because if they filed very recently, it's possible that their information just isn't updated with the IRS yet. So if that's the case, to just sit tight. If anyone in the family has an ITIN, there was a glitch recently where the IRS was not automatically doing the advance payments for families with an ITIN, but they did fix that glitch. And so a lot of those families did not receive their advance payments for July 15th, but they should be receiving advance payments for August 13th, I think, is the next payment. So if that's the situation there, they should be receiving it. In general, a good way to check on your eligibility to see if you should be getting the advance payments and having a record of the payments is to go to the CTC update portal. That portal does tell you if you're eligible and for how many kids, and it will also have a record of the different payments. If there's additional troubleshooting, unfortunately, it's a little bit tricky. You'd have to really talk through the kind of eligibility requirements. If you are sure that they are eligible, you can send them to a low-income taxpayer clinic or to the Taxpayer Assistance Center through the IRS. Because unfortunately, you do need folks who have access to kind of more behind the scenes information if there's troubleshooting that you can't do on your own. So those are just a few hints. Roxy, I don't know if there's anything else you would suggest.
I think that's covered it.
Okay. We have another question from Brian. Do you need an ITIN to use the non-filer portal? And particularly, if presuming that you have a child with a social security number.
Yes. Unfortunately, on the filing a full tax return, you have to already have an ITIN to use the non-filer form. So I think for most people who also need to apply for an ITIN, it's better to just file a full tax return because as Anel mentioned, you submit the ITIN application at the same time as you a tax return.
Great, thank you. There's been a couple questions about the 211 service in New York State, and I know Charlie addressed the 311 service, which is what we have in New York City. I would love to crowdsource this question. Actually, if any of you who are on the training have experience with 211, the question is whether or not they have assistance available in languages other than English. So if any of you on this chat have used the state 211 service and can speak to that question of languages other than English, if you could just chime in the chat and let us know, that would be really helpful. The 311 service is available for New York City residents and does have assistance in a number of languages. I can't tell you exactly which ones, but certainly I think it's 8 languages that the city generally keeps, makes all of their materials available in, but I may be speaking out of turn. Feel free to chime in if anybody has info on that either.
I would like to say something
Please,
related
Rox.
to that. So we work pretty closely with the United Way Worldwide, which some, but not all 211s are connected to. And they have shared that their services, people are able to connect to interpreters, and they provide they can provide interpretation for, I believe it's like 80 languages. So generally speaking, I believe that there is language support. I'm not sure specifically what that looks like for New York.
Amazing. Thank you, Roxy. That's really helpful. Okay. We had a couple questions. It sounds like Charlie, folks really want you to come speak. And Charlie did send out his email over the chat. And I guess maybe Charlie, is there anything more you'd like to say, since there's so many questions about giving presentations, sort of the scope or the audience to which you all are able to offer community facing presentations?
Sure. So we generally, we speak a few languages on staff, but any translation help if you're looking for something outside of English, Spanish, and French at the moment, or Bengali is appreciated. So if you can provide some sort of translation service, we're a little tight budgets, New York City municipal government. We do presentations generally as well beyond just the child tax credit. So if you're looking for information on consumer protection, worker protection, or the other financial empowerment resources we have, we can share information about those. If you're interested in having a presentation from our team, feel free to just shoot me an email. The email I put in the chat will work great. I can't guarantee you that we'll be able to make it out to you just because we have a limited bandwidth on staff, but I'll see what we can do with that. Does that answer sort of what you were looking for, Michelle?
Yes, thank you so much. I know Muna asked a question in the chat about whether or not we have local offices that certify official documents. I honestly don't have a lot more context for this question. Does that ring a bell with any of you from CBPP?
I think we would have to look that up to know specific places. There should be places, but to be able to name them, that is something that we would have to look up.
And maybe it would be helpful to speak a little bit more to like, and I'm sorry if this is already addressed, but like what kinds of documents need to be certified?
Sure, Anel, would you like to respond to that?
Looks like you're unmuted, Anel, but we can't hear you. Shoot, Anel was having audio issues earlier, so she may still be having audio issues. Okay, we still can't hear you, Anel. Well, I sort of expounded on the question, so perhaps that actually isn't the question. But if folks do have more targeted questions about certification of documents, if you can put it in the Q&A, we'll see if we can get to that. We do have another question from Brian about if we can clarify the IRS information, social SSA sharing information part. And he's referring to the part, Roxy, where you were speaking about employers not paying attention to mismatches. Oh, and now did we get you finally, your audio?
You hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
I'm sorry.
That's
Sorry,
okay.
I was having issues with this. So the documents that need to be certified are basically any document that proves identity and birth certificates if you're submitting a copy of that. The only documents that do not need to be certified are medical records or like school records. The acceptance agent does still fill out what we call a certificate of accuracy, where you are saying that the documents you are viewing are original documents. So, basically any document that you are submitting for the ITIN application or renewal.
Great, thank you. Okay, Roxy, back to the question. about IRS and SSA sharing information. So should I repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Brian's asking if you can clarify sort of that relationship, and specifically the part about where employers, aren't really paying a whole lot of attention to the Social Security number mismatch letters.
Sure. So for the tax filing process, the IRS will send to the Social Security Administration information for all W-2s. That's something that happens automatically. And in the case of, so then Social Security will look to see if everything matches, and if it doesn't, then they generate a mismatch file. And that file, the report of however many mismatches there are, that is sent to the employer. And so that process happens, but it doesn't trigger anything for the IRS. It's not necessarily a red flag for the IRS. The IRS will continue with their tax filing process. When the employer gets the report, some employers will pay attention and some won't. So some employers are aware already that some workers maybe have Social Security numbers that are not necessarily assigned to their names, and they don't mind, so they're not going to do anything about it. Other employers, if they've already withheld taxes from the employee, then again, some employers are not scrutinizing this because it's not going to affect them. Then you may have another group of employers that do care more. And so there is a chance that some employers may actually address it with the employee, but it really is a range. So I hope that clarifies the relationship.
Thank you. And Evelyn asks a pretty critical question. Is there a deadline for families to apply for the child tax credit?
Gosh, we wish we knew. Know that they can at least file their taxes until October 15th of 2021. We don't know when the IRS will actually close their non-filer portal and their e-filing system. It's usually sometime in the late fall, and as soon as we know, we'll update that information. But even if you miss that deadline, it is not too late to get the child tax credit. Folks can still file their tax return in 2022 for tax year 2021 and get the full benefit that way. So it is not too late if you miss this year's deadline, which for now we're saying October 15th, but we're not sure exactly when it will be.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, and now thank you for sending some resources there about certification of documents. Okay, I don't see any other. Oh wait, no, one question just came in. Oh, thank you. I don't see any other questions here. So I think we can go ahead and wrap this up. And again, there's been a rich sort of assortment of resources sent over the chat. So we'll make sure to compile all those and send those out. And I just want to thank our partners in offering this amazing training. Thank you so much for getting this important information out and answering all these complicated questions. And do check out, for those of you who are from organizations that might be thinking about whether or not you want to take the next step and actually, support individuals in, filling out those applications and applying through the portals, please check out the materials that are linked in the slides about, being a CTC navigator. And Jenny, can they contact you or just check out the materials on the slides if they're interested in pursuing resources and training for navigators?
Yes, so I can leave my email if you have any specific questions about the forms. Feel free to email me here. But the training does go through the non-filer form step by step, so that's really the best resource.
Really, it's amazing. I was so impressed that those trainings are just like readily available on the website. So do check those out if you're interested in getting your staff sort of trained up and actually being able to sit down with community members and apply. Great. Thank you so much, Jenny, Christine, Roxy, and Anel, and Charlie, who I don't think is on here anymore. Really appreciate your sharing your expertise, and hope we get to work again soon together. Take care, all.